In 1992, the Prodigy went from making annoying novelty records to becoming the future of British electronic music, and it all started with Outer Space. In the UK rave scene of the early 90s, the music was fast and fun, but often completely brain dead, and there was a real trend for sped up samples of kids' TV shows, slapped over some breakbeats with some massive Hoover bass patches. It was just supposed to be fun, there wasn't a lot of thought going into it beyond what might sound good the next weekend. Well, the Prodigy were a part of that initial scene. So the Prodigy's first success was sampling a kid's safety video. And in these videos, there's a creepy cartoon cat played by Kenny Everett, which makes a bunch of weird noises. And the young boy who's with him interprets that as a kind of safety message, like, don't go running off with a stranger, don't pour boiling water all over yourself.
Charly says he knows now that it's dangerous to pull the tablecloth because...
The Prodigy took those nostalgic samples and made something that's not really a bad record called Charly.
Charly says always tell your mummy before you go off somewhere.
But it opened the door to a lot of other people doing the same thing, and it got pretty irritating pretty quickly. Having said that, I did love this version of the Sesame Street theme tune at the time. As all these childhood TV sampling records were having massive success, Liam Howlett, who's the one who produces all the music for the Prodigy, he started looking elsewhere for inspiration, including reggae artist Max Romeo. Now, according to interviews from the early 90s, most of the track was already finished before Liam started to add that very recognisable Max Romeo sample, but it kind of becomes the heart of the song, and it's where the title comes from. Chase the Devil came out in 1976, but Max's big breakthrough had actually come back in 1968 when he released a track called Wet Dream. And Max Romeo always claimed this was about a leaking roof, but looking at the lyrics, I kind of doubt it. Anyway, the BBC banned it and people loved it. Chase the Devil came out years later when Max was becoming really politically active in Jamaica, and he was working with Lee Scratch Perry and Lee's band The Upsetters. Now, the same track was also sampled by Jay-Z, and it's interesting to sort of follow the money on some of these big samples. Liam Howlett's always said he paid a lot for that sample, and we all know Jay-Z has got pretty deep pockets, but that doesn't always mean that the money goes to the right people. But at least in this case, it seems like some of the money went to the right man.
Have you ever seen any financial rewards from that, or no?
Whoa, look at this. It's Chase the Devil. This is from Jay-Z. This is from Prodigy. They combine, buy this land and build this house.
So although Outer Space is kind of moving away from that Toytown Techno sound, Liam did use a cartoon sound effect. That boing sound effect is a staple of Hanna-Barbera cartoons. Hanna-Barbera being the team that made the Flintstones, Yogi Bear, the Jetsons, all that kind of thing. And those cartoons had their own sort of sonic language. When Fred Flintstone goes bowling, his toes make the sound like the top notes of a xylophone. Whenever someone gets hit on the head, it rings out like a gong. And the sound of, I think this is called a bronchosaurus in the Flintstones universe, or a golf ball rolling out of a tree trunk, is made by the noise of a jaw harp. Now, a jaw harp is a very weird instrument. You play them by changing the shape of your mouth and plucking the metal prong in the middle. The pitched up, I'll take your brain to another dimension line, Liam got from the Ultramagnetic MCs.
Pay close attention. I'll take your brain to another dimension.
And in fact, the Prodigy have sampled the Ultramagnetic MCs, and particularly this album, Critical Beatdown, constantly throughout their career on at least 5 or 6 tracks. A few years later, they took this sample from Give the Drum a Song.
Change my pitch up, smack my bitch up like a pimp.
Now, Liam's obviously a massive fan of the Ultramagnetic MCs, and particularly Kool Keith, who appeared as a solo artist on a couple of Prodigy tracks, Wake Up Call and Diesel Power. Now, this sample is taken from, like I say, the title track of Critical Beatdown, but pretty much the very first lyric in the whole of that album is a shot at Run DMC's Peter Piper, which is also sampled in Outer Space, some of the scratching work. Now, if you're interested in sampling and the early days of hip-hop and the history of sampling, and you've got this far through the video, so it's a fair bet, I've also got another video talking about how Bob James, who's heavily sampled on Peter Piper, reacted to being sampled by all of those early hip-hop people, and why it all changed when a jungle track called Circles by Adam F. tried to do the same thing, and Bob James did not like it and could do something about it. So for the drums, Liam piles a couple of really heavy rave tracks on top of each other from The Shaman and 3 Blind Mice. the effect of this is like heavy and relentless, which is why I think that light relief of the cartoon boing sound and that reggae sample works so well in contrast to it. The synths are partly some long chords that Liam played, and then some other riffs chopped up like a butcher from existing rave tracks. I've tried to understand how Liam went from these original riffs on the source records to what ends up on Outer Space, and I absolutely cannot figure it out. My friend Guinan is much better at this sort of thing, and he's reproduced Outer Space on the circuit tracks and the Ableton Move using the original samples. He's done an amazing job of that. Check those out. Anyway, he tells me that in reproducing it, it's often a case of just taking one note from the original and using that to play a totally different melody, pitching it up and down. And how that is easier than just coming up with a new patch yourself on a synth, I do not know. But what I do know is when I've tried to load up the original samples into Koala, which is a sampling app that I use on my phone, and then reproduce Outer Space, I went fully insane and threw my phone in the sea. It's like the musical equivalent of ripping letters out of a magazine to make a ransom note, or to make the front cover of punk records like bands used to do in the 70s. By the time this track came out, Liam and the Prodigy were heading down a path that no one else could really follow. They were still making electronic music that sounded great at raves, but they had a sort of punk energy and a rock approach. I mean, UK punks have always loved reggae. And they had that great sense of humour and personality. And the guys who were dancing in the videos at this point, Keith Flint, Leroy, Maxim, later they picked up that energy and started putting it into the vocals, and the Prodigy just became unstoppable. One of the most successful electronic music groups of all time, you know, a string of massive hit albums and singles. And for me, all of that started, and the personality of the Prodigy really starts on Outer Space.